Hello and welcome to the Green Collar Careers Podcast. I'm your host, Jose Almanzar, and for today's episode, I'm speaking with Jonathan Nwagbaraocha, In-House Environmental Health and Safety Counsel for Xerox. In this interview, Jonathan and I discuss his educational and career journey, the importance of being flexible when you're starting out in your career, and how to use your confidence and your skills to overcome imposter syndrome. I really enjoy speaking with Jonathan, and I really think you're going to like this episode. Enjoy! Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. I am so excited. Today's guest is Jonathan Nwagbaraocha from Xerox. Jonathan, how are you?
I'm good. How you doing, Jose?
I'm doing great, man. It's the weather here in New York is super nice. I went and took my dog for a walk earlier. After we're done, I might sneak in a little workout if my wife doesn't make me pick up the kids. So I think I'm having a good day.
Nice. Yeah, and I'm also in New York, but I'm Western New York, closer to like Canada. Weather's still nice though. The weather is still nice though.
Where in West? I was going to ask you, where in Western New York are you?
Rochester, New York.
All right, so you're not like in the sticks as they call it. Rochester's actually happened in Cena, and in fact, my godson, who will be graduating from high school next year, is thinking of RIT. He's a graphic artist, and apparently Rochester has a pretty good, graphic arts program. So I might be up there doing some when we're doing a college kind of visiting. I'll let you know for sure.
Please do. Yeah, please. My twin brother went to RIT. So if you end up visiting, let me know.
Yeah. And your brother still lives up there?
And he's in Boston area now.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
And did you grow up in Western New York?
No, I'm originally from Baltimore, Maryland.
Okay. Yeah. And you still have family down there or no?
Yes. Yeah, I do. That's where most of them are, yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
Who has better food, Rochester or Baltimore?
Oh man, crab cakes, hands down. If it's a crab cake we're talking about, that's just Baltimore.
Yeah.
But if you want like a garbage plate, which Rochester is known for, then Rochester's where you want to go.
All right, you're hiding the lead, man. I'm not from Rochester. You know my story a little bit. I was born, in the Caribbean, and I grew up in New York. What the hell is a garbage plate?
A garbage plate is basically a plate with, they call it mac salad, macaroni salad, hamburger, hot dog, chili, onions, cheese. Just a plate of that, just a mound of food.
Man, that sounds
and when you visit, we're gonna have one.
Man, that sounds like a party.
Yep. It is certainly something you don't eat every day.
So how long have you lived in Rochester?
I've been as long as I've worked for Xerox. So what, 8-9 years now?
Has the economic development in Rochester? I know that there's been a huge influx of just revitalizing that downtown area. Has that happened in the last 5 to 8 years?
Yeah, it has. I mean, they've kind of created some green spaces downtown where they have, when the jazz festival is here. Artists perform there. They have like a food truck rodeo, like a fall event there where kids can play various games and things like that. So they've done a lot. I think there's also been an influx of folks coming from Boston, New York, LA area into this region. So yeah, I think it's on the up and up. We love it. We like it here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's New York City, and I'm on Long Island. This is a tough place to be if you want to enjoy your money. Like this is a place to be middle class broke or upper class broke. Like I know couples where both are professionals. One's a doctor, one's a lawyer, and because of student loans and taxes, they're broke. They're broke. They're wealthy broke.
Yeah. Come to
Eh,
Rochester. Come to
yeah,
Rochester.
yeah. All right,
Coming
you
from,
know what?
I moved here after living in most of my life in like that Baltimore DC area, and the prices will shock you. So please, when you visit again, Garbage Plate, we'll look at some houses too.
Shout out to Rochester right now. I'm gonna have to check out Zillow when we get off here. So, Jonathan,
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about your educational background. What where'd you go to college? Where'd you go to high school? Kind of what was that upbringing for you?
Yeah, so for college, I went to Duke University and I majored in environmental science and policy because I knew I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to do something in the environmental like career sector. Then about I'd say junior senior year, I realized I could go to law school and study this stuff a little bit more. So then I moved back to Maryland, and I went to the University of Maryland for law school and got an environmental law certificate. And I was in a dual degree program. So I actually ended up getting my law degree and my master's in public policy, both with an emphasis on environmental policy, environmental law.
So, when you got to Duke
Mhm.
or leading up to Duke, did you have an interest in environmental issues already going into Duke, or this is something that how did that thought get implanted, kind of in your head?
It's a good, it's a good question. So I didn't know I was going to end up majoring that when I went to Duke, to be completely transparent. But I
Yeah,
was interested in the environment. I think when I first went to Duke, I thought I wanted to be a doctor, and then I think I thought about like the ministry for a little while, and then I heard about and started to meet professors in this environmental law program, and I fell in love with the program. I met a lot of mentors, but the true environmental bug, honestly, for me, started like younger, middle school. Um,
what
and
was that about?
it's gonna sound hokey, but it was like shows like Captain Planet. Um,
Ooh, yeah,
that
man.
that got me into and having an interest in like learning about the earth, learning how we can protect it. Like I was in like that resulted in me being in like the Green Club in middle school, the Green Club in high school, even in
Love
college.
it.
Like any Green Club, I'm there. You know?
Love it. Love
And
it.
so it wasn't, again, it was like things like that. I didn't realize at that young age, though, like what kind of career you could have. It wasn't until like university when I was waffling between these different things, trying to figure out what do I want to do. Um, I even thought I was going to be a geologist for a little while, and then
Mhm.
finally, like someone in that Green Club said, "Well, talk to this professor. They're in this program," and I was like, "Wait, this program's here? This is great. It's science, it's policy, it's a great blend. I'm going to do this." And then that helped me understand what I could do in this space.
Yeah, it's funny when you go back and kind of replay how things developed. All it takes is one conversation or somebody, making a suggestion and you following up with it. It's why I
Mhm.
encourage people that are, interested in anything, not only the environment, to seek out people that are either doing things in that space,
Mhm.
because you never know where one thought or one idea might foster others. So, all right,
Exactly.
so you went right from Duke to University of Maryland. Like, did you work in
Yeah.
between or no?
No break. I went straight through, straight
What
through.
what were some of your internships, illegal internships like?
So one year, interestingly, I think before I even got to law school, I worked for that summer for like Mary Perg, going door to door, asking folks to support financially environmental efforts and initiatives and projects. Once I got to law school, one summer I worked for the National Wildlife Federation in kind of their international trade office. And then I worked for the Attorney General in the Natural Resources Division Department. And that had me going down to Annapolis. The National Wildlife Federation had me going to DC. So again, living in that area, it's easy how you can get from Annapolis, DC, and they were great experiences. One focused more on like policy, the other one focused more on law, and that's the mix I wanted. That's why I ended
Yeah.
up in those 2 degrees. Yeah.
I it's funny you mentioned these internships and the Mary Perg one,
Hmm.
that door to door. Are you a good salesman? Because you need to be a good salesman to get people to give you money. cold
You do.
cold cold knocking on doors, man.
Yeah, that was some of the scariest things I've done because you just don't know like who's behind that door. And
Mm-hmm.
some folks, you knock on the door, 2 seconds in, they're down. But it goes the other way. When you open your mouth and say environmental, and their face scrunches up a little bit, and I'm like, oh, this is a hard one.
Were
But it
you?
taught me, though, I will say it taught me, and it's something I ended up using because one of the first jobs I had after law school was representing families with lead poison children, and entering the courtroom. Little did I know that was actually helping me to learn how to stick to my notes despite whatever's going on their face.
Yeah, yeah. Sticking. There's a reason why these notes, and I'm assuming that the notes that you're referring to are kind of your scripts.
Yes.
When you
Yeah.
go, I worked at a when I was doing a summer internship at the EPA in college. I took kind of a night job to make some additional bucks. I I worked at a fundraiser, a telefundraiser for the United Jewish Appeals Federation,
Hmm.
and I was absolutely terrible at it. I made I think I spent more money on my commute to the job than I did making money
Oh,
because I would get the script and I didn't like the script. I didn't like the script, and the dude next to me was like, "You got to stick to the script, man." I think I lasted 3 or 4 weeks.
yeah.
So
Mhm.
tell me about your first few jobs out of law school. What was that?
Well, the dream job, because what truly like Captain Planet like opened that door, but what really
Mm,
got me immersed in a career in environmental law was like environmental justice. So my dream job was the one I described, where I worked for a nonprofit in Baltimore City representing lead poison children,
hmm
primarily to get the landlord to fix the property up, which would reduce their exposure to lead, which is at that point like chipping, flaking paint.
hmm
And so that was my initial job out of law school, and I loved it. It was tough work. It was tough to see the condition that another human being would allow another human being to live in. But it was what drove me to go to law school, and I loved it. Um, Especially because I feel like in that role, it also allowed me to see as an attorney that it's not just me being in the courtroom. It's
mm,
me going into their house, like walking through the house with them, sitting down and going through some things to reduce lead limits, but also help them with whatever their issues are. If I couldn't help them as an attorney, the organization I worked for at least could point them in the direction if they needed family counseling, if they needed rent abatement, things like that. So it really taught me how to like listen to what my clients were saying and figuring out what I could do for them, but what I couldn't do, and at least point them in the right direction for resources. Um, I did that, and then I got an opportunity to work for. I decided to switch gears. I worked for a Belgian company who was performing environmental health, safety, and sustainability counseling for multinational corporations.
okay.
And there I started in the DC office, eventually transferred out to the Belgian office, the Brussels office, worked there for 4 years, and then got the job where I am now with Xerox. But I will say, like, that was a big step for me because I had a lot of folks say to me, if you go from practicing to consulting, you can't go back.
Mm, yeah.
And I did it anyway because I thought to myself, here's an opportunity. I didn't know at that time I would end up working in Brussels. Phenomenal experience living abroad, working abroad outside the US. One that I wouldn't take back, especially because I met my wife there. So like that in itself had me like worried, but I did it anyway for the experience.
Well,
Um,
and I imagine that going into the consulting world for a little bit gave you some technical, know-how that you wouldn't pick up from the pure practice of
yes,
law.
yes.
So what kind of work were you doing in the consulting, for this company? What was your, what were some of the things that you were actually doing?
So a great good like a good example is, they would ask you, could you tell us the requirements for PPE, personal protective equipment, in like 5 U.S. states, Nigeria, and then Malaysia, because it's a multinational, right? They have facilities in all these places, and so it would essentially become like a one-stop shop where they could get that analysis and help them understand what they would need to do to comply. But to your point, yes, I think it taught me project management skills that I certainly did not have, and that still benefits me today. And I think like when I'm doing the legal work, in-house for Xerox, I still put that kind of project manager hat on and figure out not only explaining the law, but how can you build a robust program project to actually implement this now. I think that it definitely was a benefit to get that experience. And lo and behold, I still ended up getting back into law. So there you go.
Listen, when you're talented, the work will find you.
Yeah. Yeah.
so I know your story a little bit about how you got into Xerox, but
Mhm.
for the listeners who haven't had the chance of knowing you,
Mhm.
um, it wasn't a straight linear path to where you are now.
No,
Yeah,
no.
can you just give
Right.
us a little insight as to that?
Yeah, so I was hired initially at Xerox to be their environmental affairs manager, working as a member of the corporate EHS&S team with council and other internal stakeholders, to identify changes in regulations and then figure out again this from that project program management. What do we need to do to make sure we comply? Um, so I started as that, but I'm working with their in-house counsel at that time. He ended up retiring because of some of that work that I've done and the relationships that I built over time at Xerox, and the fact that I had a law degree. They said, "Well, is this something that you would be willing to entertain?" And I thought, "Why not? Let's do it." And in addition to that role, I'm also compliance leader. So looking at again that ability to build programs and processes benefited me not only kind of in the environmental, the EHS, the environment, health, safety, sustainability framework, but also broader compliance. So that in that role, that's where I do things like collaborating to make sure we build robust anti-bribery and anti-corruption systems. Human rights is something else I've picked up over time. These things all matter, but they all are building upon like core skills that I've built up over time.
So let's talk about core skills for a moment, because you you have this. It's a fascinating kind of educational and career track, and not everyone that wants to enter the environmental professions necessarily wants to go to law school or wants to
Mhm.
practice law. What are some skills that you think would be beneficial for young people or even seasoned professionals to highlight in their resumes if they're trying to get into this environmental EH&S space?
Yeah, I would say one is understanding data, and I've had conversations with young people who are interested in this in getting in this sector, not just law school to your point, but in general, policy, science. And I would say one of the key skills is understanding data. You don't need to be a subject matter expert on everything. But
Right.
if you know enough to follow the data, especially in the environmental sector, when it's either, data following chemicals, data following air, data following water, sustainability data now and reporting and disclosures, if you have that core skill of being able to understand and follow data, that's going to, I think, help set you apart. And whether that's like a statistics class or economics, and these are all things that kind of I built up through the master's program, not so much law school. That's going to help you, I think, in whatever career you have, legal, non-legal. Data, everyone relies on that data. And that data is only going to become more important, especially with some of the disclosures in the US and the EU that are coming up.
I just had a discussion. I did a LinkedIn Live event a few weeks ago with the general counsel and chief sustainability officer for an ESG and sustainability consulting company.
Mhm.
And we spoke for an hour on the importance of carbon data
Mhm.
and how companies who aren't right now actively working with a consultant or don't have the internal resources in getting their hands around that data are going to be behind the eight ball with especially with companies that have to report under the EU's
Mhm.
CSDR. And also I know we're waiting for the SEC to finalize their climate reporting rules here, but now's the time to get ahead of that. And if you're a young person out there that is in school or right out of school, there's nothing stopping you from learning about data
Mhm.
interpretation.
Yeah,
No,
I agree.
nothing stopping you.
And by the way, I attended that event and it was very good. It was very good.
Oh, I'll let Christine know. So, if you were speaking with a recent graduate,
Yep.
somebody who just either is just graduated or is about to graduate, or maybe they've only been working for a year or two, what's some advice you would, give them if they want to enter, just broadly the environmental profession?
Yeah, that's a good. I think it's going to be two things that I didn't do. so,
Okay.
so
Okay.
I'd like to give advice to people of things I wish I knew at that time. One,
Mm-hmm.
I would say is relationships matter,
Mm.
uh, and starting, even as you go about evaluating law schools, trying to identify and find people who either went to law school, or went to law schools in general. Those relationships that you start to build matter, whether or not you go to law school or not. Um, I would say that's something that I wish I knew back when I was kind of like contemplating law school and getting engaged and applying. And then over time, I think as my career has developed, I think I realized more and more, getting to know people genuinely benefits you not only personally, but professionally as well. Whether it's, knowing someone you can call to help because they are a subject matter expert in an area, or just calling just to vent about your day. Like building those networks matter. So that's one thing. The other thing I didn't know at the time um, is that you don't have to be perfect. I was
Mm-hmm.
so caught up in law school, even before law school, that I had to do these things like, journal. You had to do what was the other one that folks are saying you have to do, or else you won't be able to get a job? It was journal, and it was, I think, moot court, something to that effect. These things that people are like, no, or work for a law firm. Like you have to do these, check these boxes, or else you won't be able to be employed later on. I was so caught up on that I think I ultimately um, got through that because I realized that's not true. And you heard my career path; it's been anything
Mm-hmm.
but linear. But those are two things I think. Don't let being perfect get you caught up if something doesn't quite go as you expect it to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be my advice to someone kind of thinking about getting into this area, or even as they think about like what should I do.
So,
Yeah.
on the first point on the relationships, would you encourage people to, in terms of building out their network? Because I know that this could be a little intimidating if you're
Mhm.
a recent graduate or somebody who is maybe only working for a few years, and they go on LinkedIn and they see that other people have 5,000 followers and 8,000, and they have 100, or they have
Yeah.
just their high school friends and maybe a few teachers, and maybe they get discouraged because it's not as their LinkedIn profile or their professional profile isn't as interesting in a sense as maybe their Instagram account.
Mhm. Mhm.
How would what are some practical things that young person can do to start building out their network?
I would look for organizations that focus on like in the environment if you're genuinely interested in this area. And there's one that comes to mind, Green 2.0, who's really
Okay.
focused specifically on getting BIPOC individuals into the environmental sector, whether again it's legal or non-legal. And
Mm-hmm.
so I would say like one of my like tangible pieces of advice is look for those organizations and reach out to them, because most of them, for the most part, like I know Green 2.0 is looking for individuals to connect with so they can bring them into this sector. And so that's one piece of advice I would give them is look for organizations that you think can help you not only develop personally, but professionally and build that network. Also, I mean, don't be afraid to reach out to someone, kind of cold call them. Again, going back to my Mary Perk days, you don't know what the response is going to be. You don't. But most people are interested in, I'd say, at least in some capacity, hearing from what like those who are coming up want to study, want to learn about, what their area of interest in or is. And so I think don't be afraid to kind of randomly kind of cold call or reach out to someone via LinkedIn, because you never know what's going to happen. Some people may not respond, but the one that does is going to be the one that you want to talk to.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I go out of my way, because I've been in that position, Jonathan,
Mhm.
where And I remember kind of like you, I padded up my resume with environmental experiences, working for the New York City Attorney General's office, EPA, New York City DEP. I took all the land use, administrative law classes. I graduated with honors. You know, I was a scientist before I went to law school. So I have like this stacked resume that spoke on like, all right, I'm ready to be an environmental lawyer. And shit, man, I applied to 80 different law firms and not one called me back. Not one called me back. And, you know, because I had no relationships.
Yeah.
I had not embraced or garnered or you know, really leaned into the relationships that I should have been building while I was in law school. I was making law school friends, but I left the relationships almost in the classroom. I didn't reach out to people and say, "Hey, do you know anyone at this law firm? Do you know? Can you introduce me to somebody at this agency? Maybe your parents know somebody. Maybe you have an old coworker." Relationships, honestly, if you're applying for jobs from LinkedIn or Indeed or some other jobs board, you're basically putting all of your eggs in the luck basket.
Yeah.
You know, and then to the other point, reaching cold emailing, I make myself available on LinkedIn a few times a year, inviting young people to reach out to me. I don't mentor them. I don't pretend to be a uppercase mentor, but I do make myself available if they want to pick my brain, and my phone number is available to them. They can text me and call me and we can set something up. And I'm always happy to do that because I don't always have the right answers or the answers that they're looking for, but I can at least impart a little bit of wisdom and knowledge, and that goes a long way. And I can't say how many people I've, you know, quote unquote, hooked up with jobs, but I know that I've definitely put people in touch with people for potential internships, and who knows, opportunities. You never hear from people once you reach out to them, once they reach out to you once or twice, and that's okay. That's okay. This isn't. I don't need anything from them. My thing is like, I'll give it one way, and the universe has a way of kind of throwing it back to me. So one of the things that I'm coming across in the last few years, Jonathan, if we could, you know, stay in the same topic but pivot a little bit, are individuals who have been doing work in other industries, not environmental, and have maybe 10 or 15 years experience, and for whatever reason they're inspired or moved to become environmental professionals or pivot into the environmental industry. You know, their career track is obviously a little different than a young person or someone who just graduated. Is there any difference in the advice you might give that person?
Yeah, because there is. And while I stayed in the environmental space, I think I'm going to express something that potentially someone in that position is going to find themselves thinking about and reflecting on. I think it's almost like this kind of imposter syndrome. So you want to go and enter this space which you've never gone into. I mentioned this compliance leader role. You have to be confident in the skills that you have, because those skills, one, are the reason why you got to where you are, but also those skills are going to help you as you transition into this new role. And so that to me would be that advice. Let's talk about some of those skills that you have that you developed over the time. You know, because those skills right there, same skills you can use in the environment, same skills. So it's almost like a combination of skills and then aptitude to learn, because there will be a gap. And I think those two things would be my advice. Know what you know and know what you do well. Acknowledge what you don't know and study up. Because I think that, to me, that's going to help you transition. And that's, I think, slightly different advice than those who are kind of, you know, recent graduates, because, you know, as an experienced professional, you're kind of already operating in some professional capacity. It's really like, what skills do you have? What do you do well? And acknowledge what you don't and build it up.
Yeah, no, and that's actually really good advice, because a lot of people will go through their careers and not really do the work, the assessment work of identifying what are they actually good at. You know, they use their resumes and their job titles as if that's a descriptor of what they're actually capable of doing and what they're good at. And I'm sorry, like it's not. Like
Yeah.
a resume is, each job maybe has 6 to 8 lines of maybe projects you worked on or accomplishments, but maybe I can sift out like what you're good at. But in an interview and in a cover letter, that's your moment to describe like what it is you're good at and why what you've done in the past for the last 15 years will make sense for this company or organization that's considering you.
Yeah.
But you have to do the work of like actually thinking about yourself, which is difficult for people to do. People hate thinking about themselves.
Yeah, and especially in the context of like what they may not know. I mean, we build our careers on what we know. Like that's
Right.
what we do, but you also build your career on what you don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
And that, like, as an in-house counsel, I might go to an external counsel. So because I'm not an expert in this area, but also as an individual, if you're trying to build your knowledge base, you have to acknowledge what you don't know.
Yeah.
It's really critical.
Are you aware? Would you advise, point people to any resources that might be good for them if they're either looking to, break into the environmental space or pivot into the space? Like any, web resources, books, podcasts that you've, just found inspiration or just really informational, anything like that?
Yeah, I think one thing, and it's what I relied on when I was living in Brussels, looking for a lifeline back to the U.S. One thing that I would look at is the American Bar Association section of Environment, Energy, and Resources has a year in review, and this goes top to bottom on all the developments that have happened in that year. I relied on that, and I still have some of those books around as my lifeline to understand what did I miss. Because I was like in that role of identifying regulatory developments. Okay, on a monthly basis, I'm identifying these developments. But what I use that book for is to make sure, well, what did I miss? And even if I didn't miss it, the year in review goes into an in-depth review about here are the developments that you need to know about from an environment, energy, and resource. So that one, I would say, if someone's just like trying to look at like big picture trends in a year, that's where I would start, because that helped me and continues to help me in my roles.
That's a good one, and great plug for ABACR.
I didn't even plan to do that. It just came out.
look how natural we are. Look at you and me. I'm a big fan of ABACR. I was, in law school. I met Mike Gerard back then, and he ended up giving me a book and signing it. In law school, Mike Gerard was, he was like today's, version of Taylor Swift if you were a law student an environmental law student back then. So I got to meet him through ABACR. I went to a bunch of conferences. No, ABACR, that's a great resource. I know the Environmental Law Institute does something similar where it's like a year-end review from like a constitutional, standpoint for environmental matters. So, all right, Jonathan, any final words of encouragement, of advice that you would give to, just people that are interested in helping the planet, helping society, and they're maybe on the sidelines and hoping to get in, but aren't really sure?
Yeah, I would say that this is something you can do. Having an interest or a job in the environment and environmental protection is something you can do at any point in your life. And I say that because I mentioned Green 2.0, but we had a mentoring event, and I'm talking to these young people who haven't gone to law school yet, and they're like, am I ready? Am I ready? Some of these folks are like leading like nonprofit organizations, and I'm like, y'all are doing things I've never done at your age. All right, you're ready. If you want to go, you go. like you are ready. And so whether like whatever degrees you have, whatever like school you went to, however old you are, young you are, one thing about this space that I like is if you have an interest and a passion, there's a way for you to enter this space and do some good work. And so that's why I mentioned like find the organization, start your own organization if one doesn't exist that's doing what you want to do. You can make an impact in this sector no matter where you are in your journey in life. And that's one thing I liked about it, because I was, like I mentioned, I caught the bug early, and I still have the bug, and I like what I do. I like environmental, the environmental kind of like, again, data, but also protection work that I do in my role, um, is what honestly like helps me come to the office.
Yeah.
So that would be the advice. Like you can make an impact no matter where you are, who you are, whatever you are in your journey.
I love that, and I think that's a message that people get inspired by something kind of ignites in them, and they get excited, and then they think about, like you had mentioned, this imposter syndrome starts coming out, and they won't call it imposter syndrome, but what it'll do is they'll look at other people doing things, and they'll look at, "Oh, maybe I have to go to law school. Maybe I don't have 5 years of sustainability work. That job requires
Mhm.
4 years of this, and I don't have any." And they end up, their minds kind of end up getting in their own way
Yeah.
of that inspiration. And to your point, follow that passion. Like there's a
Mhm.
reason why you got excited or fired up about this thing.
Yeah.
Why you reach out to Jonathan or Jose,
Mhm.
and maybe in a few months, think, yeah, it's not easy. It's not
Mhm.
easy just switching jobs or entering spaces that are highly competitive, but keep on it. There's something
Yeah.
in you that drove you to be interested, and stay true. Kind of use that as your North Star in a sense. Jonathan, I'm going to let you go, but last question I want to ask:
Mhm.
better food, Belgium or Rochester?
Oh, wow. Oh man. That is a tough one, but I think I'm gonna go Brussels. I'm gonna go Brussels.
Oh my
The
goodness.
the influence of like steak frites, but also like amazing African food. Um,
You,
like Congolese food in Brussels is
uh,
off the charts.
all
I
right,
miss that. I do miss that.
here's what I'm gonna do, man. If you ever run for any political office in Rochester, you just give me a heads up, and I'll edit this podcast and take that last part out.
Deal, 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 deal. We'll
Listen,
do that.
man,
We'll do that.
I really appreciate you coming here. The wisdom that you imparted on all of us, I think, can't be understated. I really appreciate you, everyone. Jonathan Nwagbaraocha, Xerox General Counsel, EHS, I should say EHS Counsel. Look him up on LinkedIn. He's doing all sorts of great things with ABA's section of Environmental, Energy, and Resources. Jonathan, my brother, really appreciate you, man.
Yeah.
Really, really
Thank
appreciate
you,
you.
Jose. Thank you.
Yeah,
Have a
have a
good
good
one.
one, man.
Bye.
If you like that episode and are enjoying this podcast, the best way to support me is to either drop a like or a comment on YouTube, or go ahead and subscribe to the channel and the podcast in whatever platform you use. Your support and encouragement gives me energy to continue interviewing these wonderful guests. Next episode, I'll be interviewing William Kellermeyer, an environmental attorney with the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and the podcast to receive a notification as soon as this episode drops. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a wonderful day.